Welcome back to another episode of the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. Today we are joined by Skip. Skip is a patient advocate for men's health after suffering for nearly 30 years with erectile dysfunction. Armed with the knowledge built over 3 decades, Skip desires to bring from behind the veil authentic truth and dialogue that advances solutions and decision-making for men suffering from ED. Married for 26 years, Skip has been prescribed every pill, pump, patch, device, and injection offered over the last 30 years. He successfully underwent implant surgery in 2020. Skip heralds his treatment as transformational to his personal confidence, as much as life-changing and definitional moment in his marriage. Skip holds a PhD in human capital management, and he is a veteran of the United States Air Force. Skip, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Mark, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity to join the podcast today.
A lot of men hesitate or struggle to talk with their doctor about erectile dysfunction. They feel shame and embarrassment to bring up the topic and don't answer honestly if they're asked directly. So today we want to explore this challenge of men struggling to share or to talk with their doctors about erectile dysfunction. So to get us started, Skip, can you share with our listeners how ED was manifesting for you way back 30 years ago or so?
I chased, as you mentioned in the opening, every treatment, over-the-counter, prescription-wise, pill, pump, patch, injection, testosterone treatment, you name it, to try to find ways to achieve and maintain a viable erection, and nothing really worked. And fact of the matter is, there's not a lot of great resources out there, or there hasn't been up until recently, for guys to have a safe space to go and find great information of more viable and permanent solutions. And the fact of the matter is, it really is a personal and it's an embarrassing subject for most men to talk about. I was a firefighter in my former career, and you're not going to hear the guys sitting around the firehouse coffee table saying, "Hey, Ted, I'm having difficulty achieving and getting an erection. Does that ever happen to you?" Similarly, you're not going to hear guys after a round of golf with your buddies say, "Hey, I'm having trouble achieving and maintaining a boner. What do I do?" So it really limited your options of where to turn and where to go. And aside from, doing Google searches that will lead you to endless arenas of mis, dis, and malinformation, it really does hold true that your primary care physician is your first line of defense. And your physician may or may not have the time to do more than to provide you with the sample pack of blue pills or the swag logo that's imprinted, on what was left but from the distributor. So I kind of fell into this category, and at the time I was in the military and working with military doctors who at the time were not much older than I, were definitely ill-equipped to talk, let alone treat erection issues. Following my military career, I ended up with a primary care physician that was a female who just happened to live in my neighborhood. So there's a little bit of awkwardness. Walking your dog and you run into your female primary care doctor. Definitely not someone that I'm going to feel comfortable coming out of the gate talking to about erectile dysfunction. But when it finally did occur, I was immediately given a consult for a urology clinic here in the Washington, D.C. area. And I had an excellent physician who started going through the simple steps of treatment. And unfortunately, before we kind of ended on the implant solution, he had left the practice for another career working in IVF. And I kind of felt like I was starting all over. The Veterans Administration didn't really offer me a lot of solutions. And again, it wasn't until my interaction with a new primary care physician in the area that I live now, who was really authentic and compassionate and really took time to go through my history and said, look, I just attended a conference and, heard about this urology clinic that is doing some really great stuff with penile implants, and you ought to consider going and meeting with them. And it wasn't until I finally had the opportunity to go and sit down with another urology clinic that, didn't treat me like I only had 15 minutes in the office, and spent the time required to answer a lot of my questions, and give me the options to successfully overcome an issue that I've chased for 30 years.
Wow. Okay. So Skip, you mentioned a number of important words there when it just comes to bringing up this topic with a doctor and really being able to kind of pursue and follow through on this. Like comfort, you felt like there was an authentic kind of response that you were getting, a sense of compassion, which really made talking about this topic a whole lot easier. Now, if you take us back again to the beginnings, can you just give us a sense though, how was ED manifesting for you? Was it trouble gaining an erection, maintaining an erection?
Absolutely. So the manifestation was strictly related to getting and maintaining an erection that was viable of penetration. And then of course that leads to a lot of the psychosomatic issues, right? It starts to become stressful. It becomes an interaction with your partner that, one starts to blame the other, and it just kind of spirals, and it led for a couple of decades to be a really stressful point in my relationship, and that's just something that has kind of given me, now that I've found a viable solution, the gumption to want to help break down those barriers of comfort, that if men aren't comfortable, talking about it, they at least are able to find resources of, somebody else went through this. Here's their story. Let me talk to them and learn from their past practice.
Yeah. So, Skip, how often were you seeing your primary care physician? And can you share with us a little bit more about just the time frame in terms of thinking about bringing up the topic, bringing it up, and it not really getting off the ground in a way that you had hoped? Just kind of give us a sense. Like, was it seeing the doctor once every 5 years, once a
Yep.
year, once a decade?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the military, I was doing physicals annually. When I left the military, I was a career fire officer, and that required, at a minimum, an annual physical. So at least once a year, we were going through all of, the who, what, where, when, and why, about your personal and physical health. And each time we would always talk about, the prescriptions that I was on. And I've talked about the pills, the pumps, the injections, the patches, the over the counter and prescribed offerings that were available. And it always, led to, okay, well, is it working? No, it's not working. And here's the challenge that I'm having. It would be trying to adjust doses, or let's take this one off the table and try a different medication. Fact of the matter is, the medications that I was prescribed all had side effects, and the side effects really outweighed the benefit. And it again became back to a stressful conversation with my spouse. If you didn't have the medicine, and you didn't, follow the, taking it an hour before, or contra indicative if you had a glass of wine with dinner, or a cocktail. If it did work, it didn't work. It just added to stress, to the point that we just kind of avoided and wrote out of our marriage, an intimate life. And boy, there had to be a better solution. So
Yes.
finding a doctor that was authentic and willing to talk more openly about it was the turning point.
But it sounds like for a number of years at that annual physical, there'd be just a conversation about the challenges with the pills not working as expected, trying to make lifestyle adjustments, trying to adjust the dosage, the timing,
Yep.
trying to figure all those pieces out. But it sounds like this resulted in a cycle of frustration much more than anything else.
100%. And I found that a lot of doctors were just really quick to say, oh, well, Viagra didn't work. Let's try, the latest, greatest, offering that was on the market. And really not digging into, okay, well, why aren't they working? Is there something else going on physically, that's not allowing the pill to do its thing. At the end of chasing my tail from prescriptions, I had found a prescription medicine that was giving me probably 80% success, but the out-of-pocket costs, Mark, were just incredible. And it again prompted another dialogue with my primary care physician that there had to be better solutions out there. I was spending $300 a month for out-of-pocket prescription medicine to have an intimate life. That's a high expense.
Yep, no doubt about that. Now, Skip, you've had multiple primary care physicians over the course of this 30-year period. Were there times or doctor's visits or certainly when transitioning to a new primary care physician that you hesitated to bring this up as an issue?
100%. Going back to, my transition from military into civilian sector, of course, I've never not had a physician that I had any difficulty talking to, but trying to talk, ED issues with a female primary care physician is just not natural for most guys, especially a guy in his 20s. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge that I've had. I had a couple of male primary care physicians in there. Obviously, it was a little bit easier, but I again felt like I was being treated with, okay, well, we're just going to up the dose. Here's a prescription. Got to go. Check back in 6 months. Or this one's not working. Let's try this one. Here's a prescription pad. We'll see you in 6 months.
So I'm going to come to that experience a little bit more with the prescription pads, because I know that you certainly are not the only guy who has encountered that. Now, how did you bring up the erectile dysfunction? And I guess more importantly, who tended to bring it up first? Did you find that this was a standard question that your PCP was asking about, and then you weren't always as open to volunteering that information? Or did you find that you had to bring it up if it was going to get addressed?
Yeah, great question, Mark. 100%. I'm the one that initiated the conversations at every level of my treatment over the last 30 years. And the first few times was always the toughest. It started in the 90s, when we started seeing the commercials for the little blue magic pill. And I remember the first conversation that I had with that particular primary care physician, and I, kind of played it off as, hey, did those really work? And then that prompted, well, why do you need to ask those questions? And, I kind of said, well, the missus and I just aren't having a lot of success in the bedroom life. And she reluctantly gave me a sample pack and said, look, let's schedule more time and let's talk through this. 6 months later, I kind of shared that it worked, but it worked less than half the time, but the side effects were really bad. And then that kind of prompted, let's adjust dosing. Let's try perhaps a different prescription regimen, etc. But at every point along the way, I was the one that had to bring up the subject, and that's hard for a lot of guys. Pride killeth man, right?
I mean, it's such a tough thing, and I think it takes courage to bring up the topic. Now, you're kind of leading into my next question, which I was curious about, which is what the doctor's response was when you mentioned ED, especially as a young man, where the expectation, like, albeit not really so accurately, might be that everything is working perfectly fine. When you brought that up in your 20s, even in your 30s, what kind of reaction did you get from your doctor?
Yep. So another great question. It was all over the map, Mark. I think the primary care physicians wouldn't give you the eye contact and would just kind of bury themselves scribbling in the chart. The urologists that I've seen, they would give you the eye contact, and you felt like they were, meeting you on your level and having a dialogue, instead of just ignoring the fact that you're talking about a really sensitive subject. And mentally, that goes a long way into helping you feel safe, secure, and able to share more, intimate details about, hey, how do I fix this? I'm not able to get an erection capable of penetration, and it really is having a lot of domino impacts, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, relationship wise, etc. It had impact in so many other areas, just outside of the obvious.
Mm-hmm. So, Skip, you have discovered in your journey that for almost any situation, for almost any man who's experiencing erectile dysfunction, there is a potential solution out there, with rare exception. So, what should a man do if his doctor reacts unsupportively or dismissively? Something which I would imagine could derail or discourage a man from wanting to further the conversation. What
Yep.
what what would you recommend that he do?
Yep. So 100%, you have to become your own assertive personal advocate. If your physician is ill-equipped or not giving you the time, attention that you feel is required to talk through solutions, it's time to find another physician. Um, Certainly, your primary care physician in most networks are your first line of defense, and if they're not the right person, then you need to really become your own advocate and ask for referrals to speak with professionals that deal specifically with men's health issues. And it wasn't until I kind of became my own personal advocate and become a little bit more vocal about wanting to find more permanent solutions that weren't prescription based, did that solution come about.
And it's so important, that self-advocacy piece, within the medical system. And my hope is that, um, you know, the system is getting better, and that doctors are getting better prepared and trained for these types of inquiries and questions and experiences that men are having. But I do recognize that human sexuality is a difficult topic, for many people, for doctors included.
Absolutely.
And it's not always the easiest thing to bring up. So men being more of a like self advocate, asking for the referral, finding a provider who might be a lot more comfortable talking about this, can make a real significant difference.
Yeah, 100%. Mark, there's a slide deck that I share with guys when I get a chance to work with practitioners who host men's groups for those interested in pursuing prosthetic as a solution. And one of the slides really does say you kind of have to have a sense of humor, but at the same time you have to stifle your pride. This is an issue that impacts a lot of men. And the fact of the matter is, men don't have to suffer in silence. There's an entire network of providers and resources, such as what you're offering with CICC, to help educate men on how to become a better advocate for their own personal men's health awareness.
So, Skip, many men report that conversation with their doctor yields a quick prescription for a PDE5 inhibitor,
Mhm.
which feels incomplete and non-specific. Now,
Yep.
you've mentioned that you had this experience as well at several points, and we want to kind of learn a little bit from your lived experience and your wisdom. How should a man raise his concerns with his doctor if all he's getting each time is something which feels like, okay, we'll switch you from pill A to pill B, or we'll up the dosage, or we'll change something, but doesn't feel like it really is hitting toward the complexity of erectile dysfunction, the complexity of the overall experience?
Yeah, sure. So again, stifling thy pride. Um, Being able to walk in and say, hey, this particular regimen is giving me an erection, but at the same time, it's the side effects are just so powerful that it negates having a successful interlude with your partner. Um, those types of conversations have to occur. And I think a lot of guys try to play that weighted factor. Well, it's working, so I'm not going to talk about the side effects because I at the end of the day want an erection. But if and what I found is with the side effects being as bad as they were, and the viability of an erection that was capable of penetration and achieving orgasm, that far outweighed the entire solution. The side effects just absolutely were as horrible as not being able to achieve an erection at all.
Yeah. So you're saying that a man should not just necessarily say, okay, we'll make a slight adjustment and I'll see you in 6 months.
Bingo.
To really be able to kind of like speak up and talk about what isn't working, what the
Bingo.
challenges are, how it's manifesting and whatnot. So skip to that end. What advice do you have for a man who is hesitating to talk to his doctor about erectile dysfunction?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of great resources out there, and if you're not willing to talk to your personal physician, or are ill-equipped to talk to your personal physician, I always encourage guys to look at the resources that are out there that are credible resources. Frank Talk is one of the best platforms to help arm men with uh, answers to questions that they have. Um, Finding resources such as what you're offering through the podcast, and becoming connected with patient advocates like myself is taking guys a long way. I just received a text today from a patient that I talked to a couple months ago, and kind of walked him through his own journey. And he was implanted on Monday, and we're kind of trading texts all week long, and he's really thankful that I was able to help give him the straight skinny on what to expect, and how my journey led me to this as the solution. And that's a resource to supplement talking to your own physician. Eventually, it's my hope that I'm giving enough information to guys that I speak with, that they walk into their physician's office armed with a plethora of knowledge, of questions to ask, and again, put their pride aside to be able to talk about things that are otherwise uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think what you're sharing is really, really powerful, because something that as a therapist who works with a lot of men who are experiencing all kinds of sexual function challenges, just learning just how long that journey can be until people are comfortable to reach out for help. And sometimes it could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of just consuming information. So when people get their hands on good, accurate information, when they can hear from other people who have gone through this experience, it can really be a powerful bridge
Yeah.
to taking that next step, which is huge. So, Skip, just to kind of wrap up, what about a man who isn't sure if he is or isn't experiencing erectile dysfunction? He sometimes isn't getting an erection, but doesn't really want to talk to his doctor about it. So he's kind of just brushing it on the side. What would you say to a man in this situation?
Sure. So look, if guys are not uh, experiencing the normal ups and downs, no pun intended, of what they know their body is normally emitting. whether that's morning wood, not being able to react if they see something that's provocative or otherwise. That's a red flag, and there's usually an underlying reason why, whether it's physiological, physical, or otherwise. It definitely is something that men need to pay attention to. And you know your body better than anybody. It has to start with recognizing what those signs and symptoms are, stifling thy pride, and being willing to walk in and be your own advocate and say, I think something's wrong here. And it was kind of those signs and symptoms that prompted me to start, well ahead of not being able to perform in the bedroom. It was, something as simple as, I notice when I wake up in the morning, I'm no longer waking up with an erection. I mean, those are little signs, but they are signs that are telling you there's perhaps something else going on. So that would be my advice.
Okay, well, Skip, thank you very much. It's been a really, really powerful message. And I think it's important that men realize that, number one, you got to be able to speak up and talk with your provider. If that isn't working for you, you're not feeling comfortable, it's time to seek additional resources or additional help. That's not to the exclusion of your provider, but work with your provider to help you get to a place which is a whole lot more comfortable. And the other important message I'm hearing is that men do, to a certain extent, need to be their own advocates.
100%.
They need to be able to kind of take control over that process of really making sure that their situation is well understood and they're connecting with the kinds of providers who can be there and be supportive. So, Skip, again, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to getting this podcast out to our listeners.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Mark.